like you might not be able to tell what it is. Hey, welcome to our live stream. Today we are going to talk about what's in a hive. And so this is intended for brand new beekeepers, and we're so glad you're here with us, and we welcome your questions as we're going along. Okay, so we're gonna talk about what things that are in a hive. We'll talk about what's in a hive. We're gonna talk about different comb colors and different cell caps, the honeybee casts, and some things about the nature of bees and the parts of a honeybee and stuff like that. So those are things that, we've been doing beekeeping classes for a while now, and those are common questions that we have. And so what we've done is taken questions from you viewers and live people that come to our classes. We've taken those questions and put them together into a series of beekeeping courses. So we've kept track of those. We love your questions. And if you have one tonight, please share it in the comments. And otherwise, we'll talk about things that we've had as common questions in the past.
Tell us where you're from, too. It's kind of fun to see where people are viewing from.
Mm-hmm.
And give us a little information about you, what your background is, what more you'd like to hear in the comments or in the questions.
Yep. And we'll address those as we come. Thank you, again for being here. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna get started. Do you have anything else you want to say? Okay, so we are going to talk about what's in a hive, and so we can. Well, first thing that's in a hive is bees, or I guess what's in a hive, what's in a colony, right? Honeybee colonies are the bees, and the hive is the house. But we'll talk about what's in the hive. So if there's a colony living in the hive, then there will be bees in the hive. And so we'd expect typically to find a single queen, hundreds of drones, which are the male bees, and tens of thousands of female worker bees. Yeah. We'd also expect to find frames. Here, let me see. I'm going to pull up a picture so you can see. All right, so we'd also expect to find frames like this, where bees put comb. And in this frame, we can see the wooden frame is all the way around it. That's because it's a Langstroth frame. If it were a top bar hive, it would just be the top bar. And then we have bees that have built out comb. And then these are brood cells. These are cells that either have brood growing or used to have brood in them. And then more brood down here, and then the bees are covering them. And then I bet, even though we can't see it, there's a little honey coming in at those corners. Yeah. So frames can be made of wood or plastic, and they provide a structure for the honeycomb. And of course, bees draw out wax honeycomb, and they construct it from beeswax within the frames. And then like we said, there is brood. So there's different types of brood depending on the kind of bee. So we saw, let's see, this photo shows really clearly the different types of brood. We have worker brood down here, and then here, these ones that stick out are drone brood. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. Yes, you can. Okay, drone brood here, where they look like sort of football shapes sticking out of the comb. So notice that the worker comb is flat and the drone brood sticks out. And then this is a queen cell or queen brood. They're raising queen bees in those two spots in this frame. Okay. Let's see, do we have any? All right. So there's a difference between a queen cup and a queen cell. Bees normally draw queen cells as they're just producing comb. They build them just in case.
Queen cups.
Yep, queen cups. And then queen cells, did I say it wrong? Sorry if I did. Okay, queen cups are just the ones that they build just in case as they're just drawing out comb. And then queen cells have a developing queen bee inside of them. And you can tell the difference. Well, sometimes a queen cup can have a small queen in it, but as she grows, they'll extend that out to become a queen cell. Am I saying it right? Do you want to?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. So we can see the difference here. One is longer, one is shorter. Sometimes they kind of look like a peanut, people say. Yeah. Okay, let's see. And then another thing we'll find in the hive is we'll sometimes find something called bridge comb. And that's when bees build, I'm trying to see if I have a picture of that. That's when bees build comb that bridges gaps in the hive. So it would bridge from the edge of the box to the frame, from one frame to another, from a frame in the upper box to a frame below, or other places in the hive. Okay, so they use those as like traveling places, right? And then we talked about drone comb already. Okay, so those are some of the things in the hive. And let's see. We have a printable about that if you want. We have a book called Beekeeping Printables, and that's for sale on our website. And it has all this information in a really easy to access way. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. This is the page, What's in a Hive here, and it just kind of goes over that information that we have just shared with you. One other thing that we haven't talked about is if we were looking at a frame like this, we can see here in the center of this frame here, we have sealed brood, and you can tell because the caps are like this darker orangish kind of color. And then in the middle where you don't see any caps on the cells, then that's where open brood is. And then on the edges, then there's honeycomb. And this is a normal frame that you'd expect to see inside of the brood chamber. The queen likes to have her brood chamber in the center and then honey on the outsides of the frames and then above the brood chamber too. Okay. Do you guys, let's see, let me just check comments real quick. Okay, so comment where you're from, and if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, and if not, we'll just kind of keep moving forward. But I wanted to show you these two combs because comb can be different colors. So you can see that one is fairly light colored and the other is very dark colored. And the difference between those is that in the darkest comb, brood has cycled through those cells several times probably. And every time the bee develops and creates a cocoon, then it darkens the comb a little bit. And then the lighter comb is probably built more recently. Anything you need to say? He's letting me talk today. Maybe not feeling so great. Okay, so like we talked about before, there's a difference between the cell caps. So here in the center of this frame, we can see brood cells, and it's like a darker yellow and it's kind of more opaque. And then these over here are honey cells. I guess they're kind of the same amount of opaqueness or whatever. But over here, these are honey around it. So you can see that there is a visible difference. So a beekeeper can open the hive, pull out a frame and look and see the difference between honey cells and brood cells. Now, sometimes the bees walk along the honey cells and create like travel paths. And then what happens is that they press the wax down onto the cell, and which kind of removes the air pocket. Normally the cell is like filled with honey and then there's an air space and then the cap. And when bees walk along a lot, then that can get pressed down so that it's touching the honey. There's no more air gap. And then those cells look kind of see-through. Is that good?
Travel stain.
Travel stain. Okay, thanks. Travel stain. And so that would still be honey cells, but you'd expect to see that too. And that just looks a little different. Okay, we talked about that image. So we talk about the brood pattern. We want to, let's see, this is a frame that we can see brood, being laid by the queen all throughout. And like this, there's some here, some here, some here. There's a lot of holes in between it. And so we call this a spotty brood pattern. So we try not to see this. We want to see a solid brood pattern. So let me show you what a good solid brood pattern looks like. This is a very solid brood pattern here. You can see almost every cell has brood in it. We can see that the holes are the exception instead of the comb, right? There's more brood than there is not brood. And even those might have younger brood in it that's just not capped over yet. So that's an excellent brood pattern. Usually our brood patterns, here's that excellent brood pattern, the other side of the frame. But usually that brood pattern in our hives is somewhere between that spotty brood pattern and this solid brood pattern, right? We took a picture of this because it's exceptional to have that many sealed brood, right? But you'd expect somewhere in the middle normally. Okay, and then I thought we'd show you some photos. These were taken by Valerie Wright, who is one of our awesome customers. She's a great photographer too. She took these photos of the same colony building comb over time. So in this one, you can see the bees, they didn't have foundation on this frame, and they just started building along here and built this small piece of comb, right? And then over time, they expanded that small piece, to each side, and then they started building some comb below. So this is what it looked like after they built some comb below. And then eventually they attached those combs on the sides and the top and the bottom, and they filled most of the whole frame with comb. So those are some things that you'd expect to see as a colony develops over time. A colony starts out small, draws out comb, it grows really big, and then through the summer, and then it gets smaller during the winter. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is honeybee casts. So the cast means the casts are divided by their reproductive ability and their sex. So we have 3 castes in honeybees. We have the queen bee, worker bees, and drone bees. We've kind of talked about those a little bit. A queen bee, there's usually only one of her in the hive, and she mates with drone bees and then lays a lot of eggs. So one of her roles is also to produce a calming pheromone in the colony called queen substance, and she can live for several years. She is the largest bee in the hive, and she's reared in a specialized queen cell. So her brood looks different, right? We saw that before. So let's see, I'll show you a picture of a queen here. So the queen is this bee right here. She's longer and larger than the other worker bees in the colony. So most of the bees in a colony are worker bees, and only one of them is the queen. Yeah. Okay. Then, let's see, going back here. All right, so the next caste of bee is called a worker bee. And so the workers do all the work in the hive. That's why they call the worker bee. They're a reproductively immature female bees, and there are tens of thousands of them in the colony. It's hard to tell bee numbers. Like, people are like, how many bees are in a hive? But because they start out small and then they grow like exponentially all summer, and then they shrink back down in the winter, it's hard to say a number, but in general, like just a ballpark number would be about 50,000 worker bees in a strong summer colony. And it varies a lot, and so you can't really quote a number through the season. Yeah. The worker bees normally do not lay eggs, and their lifespan is shorter in the summer because their wings wear out from flying. So they live about 30 days in the summer and about 200 days over the winter. So there's a special generation of worker bees that survive the winter and start building the colony again in the spring. So we saw the bee brood, the worker bee brood, and it's flat, and they are reared in regular honeycomb cells, regular hexagon cells, the same ones that bees use to store honey and pollen, and they work to maintain the colony. Okay, so I'm just going to check in. Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to comment where you're from and any questions you have. So we'd be happy to answer those. Okay. The third caste of bees is drone bees, and drone bees are male, and their primary role is to seek out and mate with a virgin queen from a different colony. So they're larger than workers. They have large eyes and they don't make really a significant contribution to the hive. So the worker bees kick out the drones in the winter. And we saw the drone brood is that brood that has like a football shape or a dome shape kind of cap. And they drift from colony to colony, and they'll be admitted really into any hive that they choose to go in, which unfortunately means that they can spread some disease. Okay, let's see. I'll show you a picture of a drone bee. You can see their big eyes, and they're larger than a worker bee, but not as big as a queen bee. Okay. Getting back to this. Okay. So let's see. Just going to move on to here. All right, so honeybees have 3 segments to their bodies. They have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And we want to remember those because, yeah, we just want to remember the parts of the bee. Do you want to say why? Some reasons?
Well, it helps to know if you're giving some instructions, for example, on where do you mark a queen bee if you're going to paint her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to put that on the abdomen or the thorax or the head? Well, obviously not the head, but it's good to know that the paint spot when you're marking queen goes on that bald spot in between her wings on the thorax.
Sorry, I'm doing that.
So if you were hunting wild bees and you were going to paint some bees that came into your sugar sample, you could put some paint on a worker bee's, a foraging bee's abdomen. But ordinarily, if we were going to paint a bee, we would put it on the thorax. So that's just an example of, it's useful to know your bee anatomy. So when you talk about bees and the different bee parts, you'll know you'll know what you're talking about. So I don't know all the technical names for all the different bee parts, but you need to know some basics.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we have a question for Mariah from Tooele, Utah. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. How many generations removed from feral bees in southern Utah are the queens in your nukes?
Let's see. This year they would be 1 generation removed. So if we had a purebred feral queen from southern Utah, then her offspring, her first daughters would be purebred, and then the next generation from that would be half. So most of the queens that you get from our feral bee project that are in the nukes, they'll be purebred queen, but they'll be mated with who knows whatever else was at the drone congregation area when they were made. So her offspring will be half and half. So this year there will be 2 generations removed. So maybe. I'm not sure yet. We haven't started raising queens yet this year. So we have some purebred queens. So that's typically the queens that we try to get to you. So it'll be a purebred queen, but then her offspring, all the workers, will be half and half. So let's see. Now the drones, they're genetic copy, only the male version of the same genetics from the queen. So your drones that you would get from that queen will be purebred drones. And so they could mate back with some of the their own feral offspring from that if you were going to raise more queens from it. So that's the percentage of genetics anyway that you'd get.
And for feral bees, it's sort of up to chance because let's see, I don't know, they go to a mating yard and the queen mates with about a dozen drones from whatever's in her area, right? So it's kind of, when we're here in locally and there's other bees around, then we have less like say of what drones they mate with. But when they're mating in southern Utah and that's the only bees around, then we know which drones or which colonies they're mating with. So we have isolated mating yards more down there, but not really up here. Yeah.
Right. we haven't got into the artificial insemination of queen bees, which could be done, but it's we don't know. In the future, maybe we'll pursue something like that, but we haven't yet.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're pretty solid colonies. I feel like the first part of this is this YouTube live was, just kind of going through materials, but please ask us more questions and we would be happy to answer them. Anything else? Do you want to talk about I don't know, talk about double screens? Tell what you're doing there.
Okay, so this last week or so, I've been building some double screens. We're using those for the purpose of raising some queen bees. So a double screen is kind of like an inner cover. And so instead of just having one screen to keep the bees out of the shell, the box above, or from if you're going to use it for a feed, let's say you're going to feed the bees with an upside down jar on your inner cover through the feed hole. Sometimes those doubles, the inner covers will have one screen on them, so the bees can't get up above it. So a double screen makes it so that the bees can't touch. So when we say double screen, the origins of that would come through Snellgrove was the person that came up with the idea a long time ago. An English gentleman, I don't know how long ago exactly, but it's a way to divide the two boxes. You can divide the boxes, and if the bees can't touch because you have a screen nailed onto one side of the board and it's space in between and another screen on top, so the bees can't touch. So the idea there is that the queen's pheromones are spread throughout the hive by contact between the bees. So if the bees can't touch, then they can't. They don't recognize that that there's a queen below or above the double screen. They don't, and they'll be inclined to produce a new queen from the emergency response. So you can see here that there's a screen.
There's a screen on this side,
yeah,
and also a screen on this side. So eliminating contact, yeah.
Right. So if you set it up though, then whichever side of the box, if you put that in between two boxes, let's say we've got two deep boxes clear full of bees, and we separate the two boxes and put the double screen in between them, then whichever side has no queen, they'll begin to raise their own. So it's a technique to introduce a new queen, to make some splits, and you can also use it to, here's the idea. So March 1st out in California with the bees that are in the almonds, we're going to put some double screens in there and let them make their own queen. So we want to get a head start on new queens as early as we possibly can. So the ideal would be to do that March 1st, and they're not leaving California until about 3 weeks later. That way the queen would have had time to grow, emerge from her cell, go on a mating flight, weather pending, and then as soon as she comes back here, she will start to lay eggs in about a week. Mm-hmm. So we just saved ourselves a whole bunch of time. We took advantage of the head start that California gives beekeepers if you're sending them to pollination and to get a new queen going.
So is there a reason that you have two of them?
Yeah. So the bees can't touch each other and spread the queen pheromones. So that if they can't touch, okay. So let's see. I'm given.
I guess I mean, like, why is there one hole here and another hole here? Are you like splitting them or just giving them more?
I did. I actually designed this so that they, if I wanted to, I could put another strip right down the middle here so that the bees couldn't cross over from one side to another, and I could use two 4-frame nuke boxes with one on top of one 10-frame. So that's the idea why I put the hole here and here. It would probably be enough just to have one hole in the middle, or I could put 4 holes here. You don't really need, the original double screen was just a frame around the whole screen, but you don't need that much space. You don't need that much screen for the heat to rise from the colony below up above. So let's see. So I didn't really find well what this is for. This is a way for the bees to share some resources, that resource mainly being heat from the colony below. So you can take a good strong colony and you could put another make a split and put it above this and do it early in the spring when it's cold outside, so that the heat from below will go up through the screens, up through the holes, and help keep the brood warm up above. So you don't have to have a really well-populated split. You can have just a frame or two of brood and just barely enough bees in there to care for the brood, and still they'll make it okay. So those are some of the advantages of a double screen.
Is there an amount of space that's like the correct space between the two screens, you know?
It just has to be far enough so that the bees can't touch through the screen. And I've actually used double screens for that are made from 3/8 inch plywood. This is 1/2 inch, and that's plenty of space. More typically, you might find 5/8. 3/4 of an inch plywood in between is more than you need. It makes a really sturdy board so that it won't warp on you, or you maybe get more longevity out of it if it's thicker plywood. But it's heavier. You don't need that. So 1/2 inch, 5/8 is plenty good.
This was scrap plywood that we had,
Yeah,
so we used what we had.
Yeah, this is OSB, so it's oriented strand board, and it's not meant for outdoor use. So this stuff swells if it gets wet. So sometimes you might get, if you're using it as a double screen like this, you might get a puddle of water in the bottom of there that built up from a leaky lid or something like that. So this isn't the best stuff to use it out of. I would use a better plywood. However, this was free. That's why this got built out of this. So
yeah,
and it should do fairly well because I put a frame. I cut a rabbet in some wood around there and made a frame out of it. So as long as it's kept reasonably dry, it doesn't get too wet too often, it'll work just fine.
And this is the same size as a standard Langstreth lid.
Yeah. So right.
So what's this for?
So that's the entrance. So when you put this in between two boxes, you'll have this entrance coming out the front or the back. You can reverse it around so that the bees going in this box are channeled up this direction, and then the bees going in the bottom box would be going in down at the entrance at the bottom board.
Awesome.
So that's what that's for. So the double screens have more uses too. That's just one for making splits and raising a queen on their own. And we also use the double screens for setting up cell starters. They work really well for that. I got some of the best results that I ever had before raising queen bees using a double screen and then placing in that grafted frame, cell bar frame of grafted larvae in there. So they work really well for cell starters, and they work well for making splits by the emergency method. You could also put it on top of the hive. If you didn't have the double screen in there, you could have an additional hole through that you could use it for a feed board, and just like you would an inner cover with a feed hole on an inner cover, you could use it for that. So they have a number of different uses. They're something that you don't have to have, but if you're into bee culture fairly deep and you want to try something new, a double screen is something to look into.
Okay, awesome. Stan also wanted to talk about some things that you might be experiencing this time of year. Would that work? So you were talking about if you need to do emergency feeding, or do you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah. So that double screen, if the screen wasn't in place, you could actually use that to put some candy board on your fondant. So this time of year is when you really need to watch the bees' weight and their honey stores for their winter. We usually don't lose bees in December and January. So it's February and March is when the problem shows up. So they might be getting close to out of feed. If you're not sure if you left them enough feed in the fall, now's the time to be sure to keep a careful eye on them because they could be running low. And so there's some problems with feeding bees this time of year, though. Don't do it unless it's an emergency. If they still have honey left in there, then they're just fine. So if you get a warm day this time of year and you want to look in the hive to see what's going on, it would be a good idea to do so. And first of all, before you pop the lid on the hive, lift it and see how heavy it is. And if it feels like they might be running out of food, they're fairly light. You can put put some more honey in if you happen to have a frame of honey left over. It's a common practice that the beekeeper might save a few frames out instead of extract it until he's sure that those bees have got enough to get through the winter. So that's something you might want to check on. So we had several fly days. It was up in the 50 degrees last week. And if the bees get a chance to fly during January, that's a really good thing for them. That allows them to break up their cluster, go outside for a little break, come back in, and recluster upon maybe a different part of the box where there's more honey. So that's something to be aware of this time of year. If the weather warms up enough for the bees to fly, then it's safe enough to pop the lid and look in there right quick. Don't get in there for a long period of time messing around, but you can take a quick look in there. Put the lid back on the same way it was, so you seal up the propolis that they put all around there exactly the same way, and they'll be just fine. So that's one thing now. So okay, let me say it as short as I can and as plain as I can. You don't want to feed bees liquid feed in the wintertime. They've got to digest it. If they've got to digest it, then they can only hold it for so long. They've got to come out for a break. So only feed the bees this time of year if it's an emergency, and it's best if you don't give them liquid feed. If it's liquid, it's going to be too cold of a temperature for the bees to even pick up in the first place. It's got to be 50 degrees. They don't want to cool their body temperature down by picking up cold liquid that's somewhere else in the hive that you put in there. So the best thing to do would feed them a candy board. The best thing to do would be to give them maybe just dry sugar. You put a little piece of newspaper right on top of the frame and the top bars of the frames, and pour a little dry sugar, table sugar on there. So that would be the best type of feed this time of year, is the fondant, candy board, or dry sugar. You'd probably just be throwing away syrup if you were to mix up some thin syrup and give it to them this time of year. So
okay.
Anyway, those are some tips and ideas for checking the bees this time of year.
Yep. And if you are a brand new beekeeper, then this time of year is for learning about bees and for ordering equipment, especially your bee suit. Make sure your stuff gets there before your bees. And honeybee colonies, like packages or nucleus colonies. Right now is the time to order. If you're local to us, we're in Spring City, Utah, and we have bee pickups along the Wasatch Front in Provo. Then right now is the time to order, and you can do that on our website. We're at thehoneycompany.com, and you can click on our shop and find bees there. We just do them for local pickup. We don't ship. And then if you're looking to learn more about bees, we have some online courses. There are 6 of them. There we go. And they are really valuable to kind of help you know what you need to know to get started. They're based on questions from thousands of questions that you've asked to us over the years. Let's see. I think I have a quiz. Do you guys want to do a quiz? So we'll see about the beginning part of it. So we'll give it to you, and what you do is you answer in the comments, and we'll see if you're right. Okay. So the first question is, true or false, male bees are called drones. So answer in the comments, and we'll see if you're right. I'll give you a second to do that. We have a comment. Okay, we will talk about bee suits in just one second. Mariah, thank you for asking. Just real quick, comment true or false, and then we'll tell you the answer, which is true. Male bees are called drone bees. Okay, that was an easy one, right? The next one is, which of the following is true about worker bees? Okay. A, worker bees can live for years. B, worker bees will be admitted into any colony. C, worker bees will work to maintain the hive. Or D, worker bees produce calming pheromones for the colony called worker substance. I had a text limit and kind of cut off the end of that. So worker substance. Okay, so answer, which one do you think is the correct answer? A, B, C, or D? And make a comment in that in there. Okay, we have C. People are commenting C. Awesome. Okay, yep, the correct answer is C. Worker bees work to maintain the hive. Good job, guys. Okay, the next one, the last one, is what do we call the several different stages of developing bees before they emerge as adults? Is the answer A, brood, B, insect buds, C, comb worms, or D, bee cups? Okay, which is the answer? What's that called? And then let's see. We'll give it a second and then we'll tell you the answer, which is A, brood. Good job. You guys got it right. I think there's a little bit of a lag between, anyway. So, yep, A would be correct. Those differing stages of developing bees are called brood. So, perfect. Good job. Okay, so let's see, we'll turn that off for a minute. That now we had a question, so we'll go back to that. Thanks, Mariah. And the question is, what brand of bee suit would you recommend for my wife who would just like to observe?
Well, just to observe, you won't need the full-on bee suit, I guess, if you're not going to be in the bees often. And so if somebody were observing us load a semi of bees from a closer distance, they'd want the full bee suit on.
And when you're harvesting honey, they might.
Yeah, they might too. So you never know who is it that might be just looking. The bees don't know if you're just observing or not. If you're the one tearing apart the hive. So even if you're a little distance away, you could still attract a mad bee to you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always. Here's what I know about bee suits. Beginning beekeepers are a little more inclined to suit up with the full suit. They're a little bit more anxious about getting stung and frightened about getting stung, and so beginning beekeepers like to suit up more, which is entirely fine. If you got to dress your comfort level of working on the bees, because the point here is that we want to enjoy our beekeeping, and if you're fearful about getting stung, then takes the fun out of things. So dress up to the extent you need to. But I will say that as you gain more experience keeping bees, you get a better idea of when to get in the beehive and when not to. Or if you don't really have the choice, you need to go beekeeping on a particular time, and it's not the best time that the bees would be the calmest, then you do what you have to do. But you get so that you can read the temperament of the bees before you get in the hive. Mm-hmm. And so the better you are at guessing the bee's temperament and adjusting your beekeeping schedule around that, the less likely you are to need the full bee suit. Mm-hmm. So eventually, I think people they might go from the full bee suit and gloves to a jacket. Maybe from a jacket there just to a tie-on veil once they're more comfortable around the bees. Mm-hmm. And once they've been stung a bunch of times, then they know it's not the end of the world. Sure, it hurts the same every time you get stung. Doesn't matter how long you've been keeping bees, but you're not so inclined to worry about it. It's not a deterrent for you to go beekeeping and enjoy your bees. So eventually, maybe you'll get into bees sometimes without gloves, but I recommend suiting up first. I recommend starting your smoker before you get into bees. Then you're less likely to need more protective gear if you're using your smoker properly. Mm-hmm. So, do I have a recommended on a type of bees from somebody who just wants to observe? Yeah, it's called an observation hive. You don't need any help.
So can I say, I wanted to say that there are like Stan was talking about, I just wanted to show you some pictures real quick of like the different degrees of protection. So you dress to your comfort, like Stan says. This is just a beekeeping veil with a drawstring. So you can buy those. You can buy those from us. I sew some of those, or someone else. The next step up would be a beekeeping jacket. So you can see Stan wearing this beekeeping jacket here with gloves, and his dad is just wearing the bee veil, right? And then there's the full suit. So here's Stan in a jacket, and this was my first time beekeeping when we were dating before we got married, and I got sucked into it too much. Just kidding. But this is a full suit that goes, head to foot. So you decide, and he even had me put on gaiters, so I covered my legs too. Right? So those are the three kind of things. And then when you're talking about bee suits, there are some bee suits that are better than others. And so for something that I want to make sure that you look for is the screen. You need to be able to see through the screen, and you need to be able to see eggs through the screen, which are very small. And so some screens are coated in plastic, which makes each wire thicker. And those screens are just very difficult to see through. So we recommend getting one that's like wire. And normally you'd find those on like a beekeeping site rather than something like Amazon or like at the local farm store. They would probably have the plastic coated ones. But if you look at like Man Lake or Dayton or Blue Sky Beekeeping, or there are hundreds of other beekeeping supply companies out there, but that is something that you need to be able to see eggs. And so that helps you to be able to do that. And then Stan likes some, and then there's lots of features, right? You could have one that unzips at the neck, so you could flip your hat off. You can have one that has a hat that extends out to the sides and has a brim, or they make some that are close to your head. Stan prefers the ones that are a little bit out farther because then the bees aren't buzzing so close to his ears, right? Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a personal preference. We have a lot of bee suits, and his favorite is just the veil, or then after that he'll wear the jacket.
There's a lot of those bee jackets, suits that have they're call them fencing. They look like the
fencing suits.
Yeah, hood that people wear when they're fencing, or sometimes people call them hazmat suits. So I'm not sure why those are more popular. I don't really know. I've worn one of those before, and I don't like them because they're too close to your ears. You got bees buzzing around your ears all the time. It's kind of a distraction. I like the veil that fits over a wide brimmed hat. Mm-hmm. And so the bees aren't crawling on the back of your neck or too close to your ears.
Yeah, and bee suits are an investment. You can get the full suit is going to be a couple $100. So be prepared to invest in that, and a jacket will be not much less than that. If you want to DIY, we also sell a beekeeping pattern that's pretty inexpensive, and it lists all the materials that you'll need to be able to sew your own. And the cool thing is once you have the bee veil part, if you want to sew it to a shirt or a jacket or something else like that, you can. That's a DIY way to do it if you're looking to save a few pennies. Anyway, that's a lot about bee suits, hopefully. So I guess we didn't recommend a specific brand, but kind of an overview of the different types of suits. I would just look at a beekeeping supply company rather than, I don't know.
Or my favorite bee suit, I recommend it, but he went out of business and he stopped making them. And it was a pullover jacket. Mm-hmm. And it had a zipper here so that you could easily take off the veil without taking the whole jacket off. So that type is my favorite. That specific brand isn't available right now, but that's what I prefer to use.
Yeah, and so Marmie's Bee Farm says it's nice to have an extra suit or veil and gloves for friends. Exactly. I love the bee veils that, well, of course I sew them, so I love them, but they're really great to just kind of have in the back of the car. And then, if you're driving by your bee yard and you're like, oh no, the lid's flipped off, I have to run over there real fast and put it back on, or just something like that. That's a handy way to do that. Okay. It looks like, unless do you guys have any more questions, we're happy to answer them, but otherwise we're through the content that we wanted to talk about tonight, unless, yeah, we'll wait just a second to see if you have any more questions. And if not, then we will end our video.
Thanks for joining us today. It's pretty basic stuff today. Maybe double screens are a little more involved, but there's always lots of beginning beekeepers. They're the ones that have the most questions, so we tend to repeat the beginning basic stuff more often than not. So anyway, if you learn something new, great. If not, thanks for coming with us today anyway. And we'll have another we'll have lots more. There's no end of content that we've got, so so stick with us and stay tuned. We'll be talking about more stuff coming up, and especially in the springtime. It all happens in the springtime.
So the classes that we have coming up are next week. We're going to have how will my colony grow and reproduce, and we'll talk about the reproduction, the birds and the bees. And then we'll talk about on the 22nd, February 22nd, 2024, we'll talk about setting up your apiary. And then February 29th, 2024, we're going to talk about how to manage your new colony, because there's some specific things that you need to manage for packages and nucleus colonies. So join us. We're going to be at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. We'd love to have you live, and then you can ask all your questions or join us after too.
It doesn't seem that we had as many people joining us here this week. And I would say that's good, because all the other beekeepers are at the Utah County Beekeepers Association Club meeting in Orem this evening. I think it starts at 7, I think, anyway. So if you're not a member of that, or if you're looking for a mentor, if you're wanting some more bee instruction and chat with live beekeepers, get to know some more beekeepers in your area and your Wasatch Front, Utah County, then check out the Utah County Beekeepers Club.
So we're members, but we don't always go because it's a really long drive.
Because we're not actually in Utah County anymore. We used to be, but anyway, we go when we can.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us, those who did and those who are watching after, and we will see you next Thursday. Okay, bye.